So my name is Lewellyn. I work as a therapeutic horticulture practitioner, which is kind of a smushing together of my background in holistic health and in horticulture.
Next slide, please, Kim.
Oh, thank you. I've also worked as a garden educator with school children, many of whom were affected by some really challenging life circumstances. And I'm a neurodivergent person and also have my own lived experience of mental health crisis and recovery. So the family environment for me was not a place that was synonymous with safety or belonging, and positive connection and community was something that I needed to seek out externally, and from a young age that quite often happened through nature. So all of those experiences, as well as the permaculture framework, really informs and feeds into the work that I currently do, which is nature-based wellbeing programs for vulnerable cohorts in the community through the Botanic Gardens of South Australia. And I'll come back to some of that work in just a moment. Next slide, please, Tim. I just briefly want to start by defining the why of why connection and community is so incredibly important. And as you can see from the slide, providing you can read my handwriting, there's lots of reasons why, most of which come down to meeting a basic human need. So the reason that isolation and exclusion can feel so incredibly painful is because historically it did threaten our survival. We've evolved together in community, and it's how we function our best. It's how we're at our most well. And there's also a really beautiful reciprocity that happens in positive connection, that we feel really compelled to take care of that which is taking care of us, be that our close relationships, our community, or the earth. Next slide, please. So on to the how. And my part in this is going to be talking about creating the right conditions for growth, so laying that foundational soil for positive connection and community to happen. And from my perspective, I think a really big ingredient in that foundational soil is safety. Next slide, please. Next one. One more. Thanks. So safety is a pretty big topic in and of itself, and so I've further broken it down into two components that I think are really important for safety, and that is inclusion and agency. So inclusion is about whether we're making spaces accessible, and not just physical spaces, digital spaces, thought spaces, processes. Are we considering a diversity of needs? Physical needs, mental, emotional, cultural, spiritual, social needs. And are we also actively checking in along the way to make sure not only that we're not being excluding, but we're proactively making sure that we're being including. The next one is agency, which is self-determination. I use those two terms interchangeably. And it's about having a voice and having a choice. So being in the driver's seat of our own destiny. And all of these elements were really key in the program that I'm going to talk about. Next slide, please. Which is the Homegrown program. So the Homegrown program was Adelaide Botanic Gardens' therapeutic horticulture outreach program, and it was delivered off-site at a social housing estate for the residents of that estate, so it was delivered on-site at the estate. And the therapeutic aims with the program were to build a strong, safe, connected community. It was through the establishment of a community garden, but I really want to stress that it wasn't so much about the what, it was very much about the how. So it was the process of engagement that was really critical to realising those therapeutic aims of the program. Next slide, please. So for a little bit of context, the social housing estate had a really troubled history. It was a very unsafe environment, the community was fractured and in a lot of pain, and the site was physically run down. Funds were committed to rejuvenating the site. The South Australian Botanic Garden got together with the SA Housing Authority and proposed a therapeutic horticulture program, and that's the point at which I got involved. Next slide, please. So just to reiterate, this program was very much about laying that foundational soil. It's important in any process of connection and community building, and also in the context of social and public housing residents. Often those residents are in social housing because they have been or are still going through some incredibly challenging life circumstances, and circumstances and experience which typically erode agency and create an experience of exclusion. So really important to build that foundational soil back up. Next slide, please. So the process. Really early on in the program, it was delivered over 12 months. In the very early stages, it was a matter of getting all of the participants in the group together and putting the question to them of, what do you want your community to look like? What values are really important to you? This was also done over a series of sessions so that the process itself was accessible. Yep, that one, thank you. And every single person in that group contributed their voice and their values and their vision for the community, the things that were really important to them to build that program. We further amalgamated all of that information, and then the group further refined that down into 8 really key values that you can see in front of you there. And they also served as group norms too. How do people want to engage with each other? How do people want to be treated in that community? And for anyone that's here that's done their PDC at the Food Forest, it's one of the first things that Annemarie does in the PDC is get the group to set up their own group guidelines. It's a really effective process for positioning participants in the position of co-creator. Next slide, please. So from there, the group then distilled those 8 core values down even further into this wonderful essential oil of a vision statement, which is the community garden is a safe, inclusive space for collaboration and growth as we provide abundance for ourselves and each other. And if anyone's thinking that this process is sounding a bit familiar, it's because it is very much based on Dan Palmer's holistic decision making. So big hat tip to Dan Palmer. And if you're not familiar with holistic decision making, I really encourage you to seek it out. That model in and of itself is an excellent way of embedding safety, inclusion and agency into design processes. Next slide, please. Oh, I should mention too, for 6 months of the 12-month delivery, there was no physical garden space. It hadn't been built. There was space set aside for it, but the infrastructure wasn't in place, dealing with government processes. And it actually didn't matter. It was a real testament to how effective the process was. Because that community had put their voice into it, it was their values, their vision, right from the get-go they owned and had stewardship of that program. And so when there was a physical space, the vision and the values went into the entryway of the garden, and it served as a reminder and also as guidelines for other people coming into that space of this is how we treat each other, this is what's really important to our community. Next slide, please. And so the outcomes of that process are pretty compelling. Over the course of that 12 months, there was an overall 30% increase in wellbeing, which in technical terms is freaking amazing. And if you're curious, at the 6-month mark, that period that there was no physical garden, the wellbeing increase was 15%. So it was a further 15% after the physical garden was in space. So the physical garden was important. It just wasn't the be-all and end-all of that process. It was very much about embedding agency and inclusion and safety into the process. Next slide, please. And for some soft data, soft and really powerful, This is a wonderful quote from one of the residents. "It's not just about the planting and the gardening. We get to run it. It gives us our power back. The garden has probably been truly the first place I've had agency in my life." So I hope that that brief overview of the program has been a bit of an example and testament to how powerful those processes of building up that foundational soil of agency, safety and inclusion to then grow connection and community from. So on that note, I will hand over to the master of building community.
Good. This is an aerial photo of the food forest. It's on Ghana land. It's right on the Gawler River, and this green strip diagonally across the bottom is the Gawler River. It's part of the Adelaide Plains, and it is these days the northern edge, most northern edge of Adelaide metropolitan area. So beyond that is rural. Next slide, please, Tim. So it was established, well, first permaculture design bits in 1983. It's both our home and our business. My commute is 3.5 metres from my side of the bed to my desk chair. I mean, I obviously walk to the farm as well, but, you know, business miles are low. It's 20 hectares. Our business is divided into two components from a business perspective. It's primary production, and we grow over 150 food varieties comprising of pistachios, all sorts of fruits and nuts and vegetables. We have some poultry, some sheep, some cereal, a bit of everything. But most importantly, particularly for this session, and I've highlighted in pink and green colours of pistachios, that in this session it relates to a lovely story about Afghani women. We're certified organic and have been so since 1995. We employ 5 part-time staff and have the occasional woofer or intern. We also run an education program of permaculture design courses, short courses, open days, and tours, school tours, uni tours, interest group tours. Next slide, please, Tim. So the two of us, plus our staff, and we each of us have our unique strengths, no faults, and special skills. We have quirky edges, like your leaf, and in terms of teamwork, Graham is very good on big picture, big view, more attention to detail. Somewhere in the middle is a very healthy balance, and that's us, the food forest. We both like bringing people together, understanding culture, and we've travelled a fair bit. BC, in our language, that's before children. We both passionate about urban resilience and keeping farmland as farmland, particularly in the peri-urban areas, but everywhere. And I guess I'm particularly interested in food and how food can connect and how powerful that is, socially, culturally, and for our health. Next slide, please, Tim. Next slide, please. Yeah, thank you. From a primary production perspective, we are well known for growing lots and lots of food. Most of that is sold at the Adelaide Farmers Market. Next slide, please, Tim. We also, and we have Robin Clayfield in the room, this is about 20 years younger, run education programs. So we bring awesome people to the food forest, like Robin, like David, like Brenna and Hannah last week, to help us as a whole team do educational programs. And we continue to do that. And as part of that program, next slide please, Tim, as well as bringing specialist educators in, we run tours that connect school children to land, agriculture and growing food. And I get an enormous buzz out of these year 3s who were part of a rural Stephanie Alexander kitchen garden program, who I invited to go out and feel under the mulch the temperature difference. And on that day, it was a November day, that would have been about 45 to 50 degree difference. So they tiptoed, very careful, in little groups to their patch of mulch, and one kid turned around and said, "It's freezing!" And really, it was 22 degrees, but it was a hot day in November, so that really brought home the importance of mulch. Next slide, please. We also educate, and in this particular slide, we were sharing our horticultural knowledge about context in South Australia with a group of Burundians who had their own specific crops they wanted to grow, but came from Burundi. Tropical, mountainous, beautiful, African, to the Adelaide Plains. Bloody hot, bloody dry, seriously high evaporation rates. More than 3 times the amount of rainfall we have as evaporation. So how can we share that knowledge with people for whom the growing environment is so different? And the other big buzz there was one of the kids asked, "Can I have a banana leaf? In my country we use them as umbrellas." So multifunctional plants. Next slide, please, Tim. In the conversation, because they were there for the best part of the day, we talked about music and goods, bless you, about goods. And so I had some thumb pianos, and so I brought them out. And gourds are made from zucchini, pumpkin-related plants, so that was another unintended, totally awesome extra experience. Next slide relates to what I think is one of the most beautiful, hard kind of stories, where we hosted a group of Afghani women. Their coordinator of their group, English definitely wasn't their language, and they had 2 translators with them. And one of the women just about fell out of their little bus because they'd driven along our boundary. And pistache? Yes. And so there immediately was a connection, no English, but food. And we ended up standing underneath a shatut mulberry. They grow shatuts. In Farsi, shatut is Shah is king, like the Shah of Iran. Tut in Farsi is mulberry, shatut. So suddenly, the boot was on the other foot in terms of information giving, conversation, and us learning. And I cannot tell you how important and how heart-grabbing that is. They came in November. We walked to the pistachio trees. They're not ripe in November, they ripe in February. So a number of visits were arranged to come to the food forest to eventually harvest the pistachios in February. And during the regular visits, next slide please, Tim, we got to exchange lots of stories, mostly through translators. They got to pick lots of food, and interestingly enough, on the left slide, they're plants that we consider weeds, marshmallows and stinging nettles, and they prepared food with us and for us using those plants. So many visits, and then one trip was a weekend to the Barossa, where they had a weekend together. The facilitators didn't really know what to expect, but they took lots of fabrics, textiles, beads, colouring stuff. And at the end of the weekend, they came back via the food forest. Next slide, please, Tim. And they'd made this collage, but 2.5 meters long, 90 centimeters wide, and it depicts the weekend. Its star stands for survivors of trauma and torture. The Barossa little house they were in, the van that they used to get there, lots of food sharing. And next slide, please, Tim. The attention to detail was exquisite. I've never seen Graham embrace his towers. And what is so lovely is that we've both been depicted in their traditional way of drawing themselves in their costume, and the happiness, and yeah, that was just absolutely amazing. That collage went to the Office of Stars. Next slide, please, Tim. So it's just beautiful to realise how food can ground you, how food can connect, and how you can hold that in your hands. And next slide, please, Tim. As well as food, smells can take you back to places. Smells can, I guess, introduce you to new things. In this case, it was a lemon verbena, and how you can make tea out of it. And then these are stories from the food forest. But if you're in public places where the tours aren't necessarily guided, you can, I guess, include a lot of these stories through language. And this is the photo on the right is one of Emma's photos from the Botanic Gardens, where the name of the plant is there in lots of languages, in the botanical name, in Farsi. And so lots of people can realize that it means something to lots of people from lots and lots of language groups. So talking about language, next slide please, Tim. I was asked to share a session on compost making. And I went to, my session was the second week. I went along to the first one and I realized that there was a group of English women, English-speaking women, and a group of Afghanis, and everything was translated. And it started in English, stop, translate. Back to English, stop, translate. And many years ago, I went to a food safety conference, and that's all jargon. So the girls who organized that conference, they started the conference in French. Bonjour, madame, monsieur. And farmers, fisher people, lots of suits, and suddenly this panic. Shit, no, French, right place, right. It was the language. These women started deliberately in French to make people who are so used to jargon realize that it is really disconcerting when you don't understand what this is about. And that was the French-speaking bit to a whole English audience. I thought it was such a clever idea because that I'll start my compost session in Farsi. Google Farsi, easy. You get this beautiful script, can't read it. So I enlisted the host of the translators, and she came up with this list on how to pronounce it. And Emma, actually, you mentioned grounding through nitrogen and carbon earlier. They're the two words that are the same. Nitrogen, carbon. They're the two words I can say in Farsi because that's how it is pronounced. Anyway, it was hilarious. The women thought it was good. And I did a few sentences, and that was the end of my Farsi kind of career. But I think it is really, really important to realize that how much we rely on language, that we need to take the trouble to actually try another language and realize that how can we include. So, talk about inclusion. I'm now going to hand over to Emma, who's going to, Detta, and who's going to talk about her journey as a traveller.
Hello. Before we start, can you all hear me? Yeah. Like this? Cool. No? Okay. Hello, everyone. Hello to the people that are online, if there's anyone watching. I am Detta, which is short for Benedetta, and today I would like to share with you my perspective as a traveler and how I cultivated connection and community in these 5 years in Australia. So I am originally from the pre-Alps area in Italy, from a little village. And when I was 19, I decided to leave Italy and start traveling because I had this feeling within me that something was missing. I had all the resources that one would think would allow to create connection and community. But as I just said, there was something that was missing. I really wanted to make a change, to make an impact, but I didn't know how. And so I started traveling and I arrived to Australia where I had the opportunity to try so many different things. I went from yoga retreats to bush regeneration, but nothing really felt good, nothing really excited me, nothing really gave me the tools to make that change that I wanted to make. And so I kept feeling restless and frustrated, like a few speakers have already mentioned in the past 2 days. And that was until I found permaculture. And I was like, whoa, this is cool. And someone once said, permaculture is a revolution disguised as gardening. And I was attracted to permaculture because of gardening. And then slowly, by visiting different permaculture projects and places, I found out that permaculture is not just about gardening. It's so much more, as you probably know. And it wasn't until I did my first PDC that I realized, whoa, like, this is amazing. This is where I want to be. This is what I want to do. How can I keep being here? How can I make a change with permaculture? And so by applying the filters of permaculture principles and ethics, I was guided to the food forest. So please, next slide. And this might sound like a love letter to the food forest, which it is. It absolutely is. Annemarie and Graham really stand for what they believe in. They apply permaculture ethics and principles, not just on their piece of land, but to their lives. And in this case, I'm talking about the people care ethic. So if people's needs are met in compassionate and simple ways, they and the environment surrounding them will prosper. So I'm just going to drink a little bit of water because my mouth is dry. Thank you. So, as we talked before, the tools to create connection and community are safety, inclusion, and agency. And those are the tools that Annemarie and Graham gave me, and that really provided healthy ground for me to grow. Next slide, please. Another very good example of how you can make an impact and how you can feel connected to people without necessarily being face-to-face with them is Permaculture for Refugees. So Permaculture for Refugees' vision statement is nurturing new relationships between people and places. So it's a small network, but international. And despite not being face-to-face with these people all the time, for example, Ro and Nice and Rob here in the front, I still feel connected with them because we all have a common goal, which is permaculture education for refugees and host communities. And through Permaculture for Refugees, I really feel like I'm making an impact. You don't need to be doing huge things to make this world better. Just do your best with whatever resources you have. And so, next slide, please. I hope that with this panel today, you're reminded of how powerful you all are with your actions and decisions, because it's so simple to care for people by just listening and being there for them. And Vandana Shiva once said, the most valuable things one person can share with another are the gifts of knowledge, awareness, hope for the future, and the tools to make change. And this is exactly what Permaculture for Refugees and the Food Forest have given me, and this is what you can do for other people as well. Help them create connection and community. Thank you very much. And we'll move on with Annemarie.
Next slide, please, Tim. Yep, lovely. So let's do some group work. In this session, where we're going to group you in groups of 3, but it could be 2 or 4 if that's more logical. You're going to, in this group work session, you're going to give each other and receive some sustained, compassionate attention through listening and sharing. In this room, we have lots of common ground and values, and we're going to share something special to us It could be an experience that was special to you, you would like to share, or share the memory of when you felt connected to a place and what that meant to you. Or if you don't feel comfortable about doing that, that's okay too, or nothing comes to mind. You can talk about your leaf. Describe its uniqueness, its edges, its smells, its whatever you feel comfortable sharing in your little group. So there's going to be essentially 6 minutes. How much time have we got, Guy? About 15, 20? Cool. And so 2 minutes each in your little group. If there's 6 of you and there's 6 minutes, do the maths, it's 1 minute each. But if we stick with we do a 2 minute, 2 minutes, 2 minutes, 2 minutes in a share group of 3. That's the maths I've got here, so you guys work it out. We'll do 30-second heads up bell so you can round off your story and the next person can share. So something you would like to share, a place that you felt connected to. Form your little groups, make yourselves comfortable, and 2 minutes each, and we will sound the bell at 20 seconds. Third. You got a mic that works?
Yeah.
30 seconds for changeover. That was loud. Changing to the last person in your group. Third.
It's actually really beautiful standing back and watching people connecting with each other.
And we've So, that's all right. I've got the 3 people in the group, and that's good. That's up to that.
Hello? Hope you're having a good time there. Okay, so before moving on to the end of the session, I invite you all to stand up if you want, and either jump or stretch or move around just to, Okay, that's good. Nice.
It was actually really lovely standing up the front here looking out at the group work and seeing the sustained compassionate attention that was happening and the connection that were happening in the groups. So thank you for participating in that. And can you change to the next slide, please, Tim? So, just to wrap up and contextualise the tree, it's actually Eucalyptus socialis. It's called socialis. Socialis means friendly. And Eucalyptus socialis, which is red mallee, it grows best in community with other trees. And I just want to make another analogy too, that with the trees and the leaf, that even though the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, it's about holding two things to be true at the same time, that each and every one of those parts, those diverse, unique and special parts, is an integral and really important component of the whole. So thank you so much. And we'll move into Q&A. Yeah.
So I'll just run around with a mic if anyone wants to start us off. There we go.
Hi. My question is, I know that you guys are open to people coming in, learning, and our diversity coming to you, but how do you find that you're reaching out to bring that to you in the first place? Like, does that question make sense? Anyone? Anyone?
Mic works, yeah. So the food forest, because there's so much on the ground and we value people coming to us for the experience. Yes, we do go out and we can run workshops in other places, and we have, but I guess that's our strength. So that's what we focus on, and that means that we are working very much in our local community, and by local I mean South Australia. So does that answer your question? From our perspective as the food forest?
So in the case of the Botanic Gardens, it's been about going out and engaging with cohorts. Annemarie briefly showed that multilingual signage, which is from the Global Garden Program. So we went out and met with the Australian Migrant Resource Centre and collaborated with them on the program. And then in the case of the social housing community program, which is homegrown, it was going out to that site. And it's very much a consultative process about what that community wants, rather than me going out there and saying, "Oh, this is what we're going to do." It's the question asking of, what do you need, and you tell me, and I'll facilitate the process. But tell me what it is that you would like. So it's very collaborative, and yeah, going out and partnering with organisations.
I didn't understand the question. If you'd like to ask it again, please.
So my question was on the basis of, instead of like bringing people to you, how are you going to people and kind of bringing it to them, if that makes sense? Whether it be in any aspect of community, obviously from a plant's perspective here.
So how do
you either reach out to people or bring them to you?
Oh, so how do I personally reach out for help, and then how I personally help others? Sorry, brain fart.
Well, let's use the example that you had for your slides with working with the immigrants or refugees. Are you reaching out to them, or are they coming to you? Like, how is that process going? That's what that connection with that community and like bringing it together.
Sorry, I'm here now. Thank you.
Okay.
What's your name?
Ayana.
So, in the context of permaculture for refugees, we have had refugees asking for help, and it's a collaborative work that we do all together. I work with two other people, Evan and Sundus, and the three of us initially get together, think about the context what this person is in, and then come up with possible solutions. But then the very interesting thing about permaculture for refugees is that it then goes to other members of the network, and then we discuss further on the next step with these other members. So it's a very collaborative work. Does that answer your question? Also, tomorrow morning, if you want more information about all this, and you'll get a very great answer, there's 2 sessions about permaculture for refugees. One at 10 something, and one at 12. So come along and you'll find out all about it. Yeah. Yeah.
Just in closing, from each of you, a little bit, because we've got 2 minutes to go, how important is cultivating community in facing the problems that we have to solve over the coming years?
It's everything, because we've got to do it together. So it's the foundation of how we're going to do it. You can't do it alone, and yeah.
Can't do it alone, and the most diverse techniques, people, processes, invitations, going out, whatever works best for anybody is the most important way to go. We need to employ every strategy, include every single group, network together as much as we can to face the problems.
Collaboration is a no-brainer. 1. 2, be creative with your solutions. And 3, like Hannah said the other day, think big, and the result will be big. And radical hope. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.